Good morning, Sason. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning. Ayem Kotzev Amalachim Meruba. We're standing in special days leading up to the day of Chamishas B'Av, which is Lo Yom Tovim Yisrael Chamishas B'Av. And this year in the 3 weeks we had a terrific run on focusing on on rebuilding the Beis Hamikdash, the mitzvah Shmiras Hamikdash, and some terrific things that we covered. We learned part of Mesachas Midos and so on. So in last week's Sunday Shir, someone kept on insisting that it's permissible to go up to the Temple Mount B'zman Hazeh. So I didn't want to deal with it last week, but I said we'll touch on it this week. So this is going to be the first shayla we'll deal with. This it comes up whenever we learn about the Beis Hamikdash. There's someone in the Shir who always keeps on bringing up this question: is it permissible to go up to Temple Mount B'zman Hazeh? So that will be our first shayla we will deal with, especially now that we're waiting that the mamish ototot, we're going up to the Har HaBayis, so it's a good thing to speak about. I'm not sure if the Ma'arim HaKemis was sent out yet. I'm sorry, I sent it out the last minute, but it will probably be out shortly. There's a piece of newspaper that I sent out as the first Ma'arim HaKem. When Israel recaptured Yerushalayim after the Jordanians held on to Yerushalayim for 19 years and did not allow a Yid to enter, it was the Jewish world was in a euphoria. The miracles that happened in 1967 Six-Day War was all the world saw that Yesh Elokim b'Yisrael. The Yad Hashem was palpable. All the nations of the world had unbelievable respect for Kollel Yisrael, and finally the Eden had they had the dominion over the Har HaBayis after 2,000 years. Now the silly mistakes that were made afterwards is not what we'll talk about today, and where we stand today is very unfortunate and sad, where Yidden gave up the running and the ownership of the Har HaBayis to the Waqf, which is constantly digging and breaking and maiming and then using it for all kinds of purposes. But just to focus on this question, is it mutter for you to go up the Har HaBayis? So in 1967, there was no Waqf, and there was no Arabs standing there and protesting. There was no riots. There was no intifada, first intifada, second intifada. No one thought of such things. And all of a sudden, it was permissible for Yidden to go up to the Har HaBayis. And was the question, are Yidden allowed to go up to Har HaBayis? So I sent you a newspaper clip from Machane Haredi, a little bit of a study on what happened in 1967. If you see, there is a cruise that went out in Yerushalayim, signed by the Ashkenaz and Sephardi chief rabbi of Israel, Rabbi Yehuda Unterman, Rishon LeZion Ashkenazi, and Yitzchak Nissim, Rishon LeZion Sephardi, and many Rabbonim at that time, Becheskel Abramsky, Agon Becheskel Abramsky, Rav Eliashiv, Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Rav Waldenberg. The list goes on and on and on, and they write like this: that no man or woman should dare go into the entire shetach of the Har HaBayis. Make no difference which gate you're using and where you're going. The entire Temple Mount, a Yid should not step foot on the Temple Mount. Besides, the isur of not of the question of a person if he's allowed to go there, there is also an unbelievable mitzvah in giving cover to the mikdash and moida for the mikdash. The schul says is again Kadosh Baruch Hu she'asa mehira lahachash gelos hashlema v'nisma Signed, Rabbi Yisrael Yehuda Unterman, Rabbi Cheskel Abramtzi, Yitzchak Nissim, as I said, Rav Eliyashav, Rav Auerbach, Rav Altenberg, and so on and so on. There's about 50 names on this Oido Azhora. And also I sent you here, I sent you that Rav Kanievsky, the Koheles Yaakov, the father of Rav Chaim Kanievsky. There's a Sefer Orchos Rabbeinu. He was like very tumult right after 67. He wrote like 5 times like an announcement. 5 times he wrote it over again and again. By the time he wrote it the 5th time, this Haidoah Vazhora went out, and he told already his Mishamish, forget about it. He asked him to get a few Rosh Hashivas to sign, but after this one went out, so he said, oh, never mind. But anyway, as an historical document, it's interesting how he changed it 5 times. So I want to go through the arguments. Also, I sent out a tshuva from Orletzin, from Chacham Ben Zion Abashol, the Rebbe of Rebbe Vadia Yosef Zecharinim Levrocha, also who felt that it's totally osur. An interesting twist in this question he has over there about the soldiers going up, which must go up. The truth is, I should point out that the Rambam says that even the Kodesh HaKadoshim, if there's no choice, they used to have these elevators they would go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim to fix. But if there is no choice, so you get, you use Kohanim, if not Levim, if Tehodim, if we have no choice, even Tameim are allowed to go in through the doors to do whatever they need to do. Kol Shkem B'zman Hazeh, when you have soldiers in the IDF, it says the Orletzian that it's a Shayla Pikuach Nefesh, and it's also the Kovet the Mikdash, so they're allowed to go in. He has very interesting things. He says, but they should not have much in their pockets, because you're not allowed to bring Talmudic objects in the Harabayis. And also he says that they should make sure not to have wild hair. You're not allowed to be Parua Roish. And as soon as they finish a job, they should run out. And another fascinating thing he writes, I underlined all these things. You can look at it later when you have time, that a Levi, who is a soldier in the IDF, and he's guarding around the Harabayis, must make sure he never falls asleep. Otherwise, the Ish Harabayis will come and burn his clothing. So that's just fascinating little details. Also, he says, what's of Chas Shema? You did go up in the Harabayis. It's a Chiv Kodus. He has to do tshuva. What happens if a person went up 5 times? So he brings in the Alter Rebbe in the 3rd Pedic in the Geras at tshuva, a person that did an Aveda repeat of the Aveda. So you do the tshuva, say a person did Aveda 5 times. So do you do the tshuva once? Because the Aveda you did, or you do it 5 times? Or there's a pshat that the Alter Rebbe says that tshuva you do 3 times. Anyway, look at the tshuva Erletzin. It's a fascinating tshuva. And also there is another few fascinating tshuvas which I'll get to in a minute. Interesting stories that Tzitz Eliezer about G'dolei Yisrael, who and how they treated the idea of entering the Harabayis, the Rambam, the Ramban, other historical stories about public figures who came to Yerushalayim and how they treated the Kedusha of the Harabayis.
Rabbi, if we're not allowed to go onto the Harabayis, how are we going to build the base of Mikdash? You have to go onto the Harabayis to build the
So good question. Let's do. I jumped a little ahead of myself to just give you first an overview, a historic overview. As I said, in 1967, there was many Rabbonim who came out with the thing that's also to go with the Harabayis. The shaila is why. There are several reasons. If you break it down, there are several reasons why it would be also to enter the Harabayis. Why would it be also B'zman Hazeh to enter the Harabayis, and under which circumstances will we enter Mi'etz Hashem l'chsheibona beis hamikdash? My computer tells me that the interconnection is shvach. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I can
hear me. Okay, very good.
Nice and clear.
Okay, Baruch Hashem. So let's start. Let's start our journey on this shaila. So again, the question is it permissible today for a Yid to go up on the Temple Mount, the Harabayis, as we know it today, with the walls that are there today? And as I said, there was a tumult about it in 1967 when it was very easy for Yidden to go up to the Harabayis. And there were many Gedolei Yisrael at the time who felt very strongly that it's also. So I want to go through the reasoning behind it. Since I said many Gedolei Yisrael, so as you know from my question, that are those that feel that it is permissible or maybe not a mitzvah. And like I said, there's someone that keeps on asking this question while we're on the shiur and mentioning it, and in his opinion, it's permissible or maybe even a mitzvah. So I said that we will cover it. So let's go into the sugya. Okay, let's start with the Rambam. Let's start with the Rambam, and we'll mostly focus on the Rambam because the Rambam wrote his halachas on these subjects in a very organized way. So even though there's other shittas and Rishonim that talk about it, but they didn't write the Shulchan Aruch. Fascinating that it's mentioned. This din is also mentioned in Shulchan Aruch. We'll get to that in a minute. But the Rambam is the first authoritative posek who wrote about all the mitzvahs, including the mitzvahs pertaining to the Beis Hamikdash and Avodah the Beis Hamikdash, or Sefer Avodah, which starts with Hilchas Beis Habechira. So let's start with Hilchas Beis Habechira the Rambam. Look, the Rambam, Hilchas Beis Habechira, Hilchas Beis Habechira, Perek Vav, Halacha Yud Dalet. He says like this. Every play, the Rambam talks about being moisef ala ir vala azores, and he gives a whole description how you could add. Mashiach will come. Presumably, we're going to need the azores will need to be expanded. Yerushalayim will need to be expanded. So how do you expand the ir and the azor? So there's a whole procedure of how they do it. And there needs to be a melech, and there needs to be a navi. You need to have urim betumim. You need to have a sanhedrin. They go around with two toidas, and they sing on every space. They go around with two toidas, and they go out bekinoidis, benavolim, betziltzol, akopina, valpina, koleven, even shibishalayim, and they sing arimim chashem kidelisonu until they come to the end of the place where they want to be mekadosh, and over there they eat the one toida from the two lachme toidas, and the second one they burn, and the Navi says which one to eat and which one to burn. Okay. Now, the Rambam continues. The Rambam says, but if the Rambam says if it wasn't done in this order, there's not a kiddush gomel. Then they didn't do it. Presumably, when Mashiach will come, we will have to expand Yerushalayim, right? You have today the old city of Yerushalayim and the new city of Yerushalayim. How many Yidden live in the old city of Yerushalayim? How much space is there in the old city of Yerushalayim? Think about how many Oilei Regolim there's going to be, even before Tchias HaMesim. Right? Talking about millions of Yidden. We need to expand Yerushalayim. And same thing, the Makom HaMikdash. So there's a procedure how you do it. But if you didn't do it the correct way, so then it's not Kodesh B'Kiddush Gamur. Ezra also, Ezra Shtei Toides. Find that Ezra did two Toides when he rebuilt the second Beis Hamikdash. Sagt der Rambam Zecher Shas, v'lo b'maisav neskadosh hamokim. It was only a Zecher for the idea of consecrating the place, but it wasn't really that his actions really sanctified the place. There was no malach, there was no urim betumim, so there was missing ingredients. So therefore, the procedure he did was not effective. So what's the kedusha of the second Beis Hamikdash? He says, "Kedusha rishayna shekidusha shleim shekidusha azar v'Yerushalayim l'shaita v'kidusha yitzel asalavi." He was mekadesh Yerushalayim and the Makom HaMikdash, l'shaita and li'asalavi. Therefore, Makrivin HaKavanos, Kolan Afal B'Shein Sham Bayis Bonav, Oichlem Kotch Kadashem B'Chol Azar Afal B'Shecharei, B'Vein Mukevus Mechitzes, Oichlem Kotchem Kalam Amaisa Sheni B'Chol Yerushalayim, Afal B'Shein Sham Chaymev, Kudusha Rishayna Kitchel Shaita V'Kitchel Azalavi. Therefore, you could make Kabaranas even when the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed. You can eat Kotch Kadashem in the whole Azara, even though the walls are destroyed. Eat Kotchem Kalam in the whole Yerushalayim, even though there is no Chayma. Oma, sagt der Rambam, an Yoime, b'mikdash v'Yerushalayim, shekidusha rishayna, kedushasan la'asad lave, kedusha shor Eretz Yisrael linyan shehiyus ha'maises, k'yotzu b'mloikit shel lave. Why do I say that the kedusha of the mikdash Yerushalayim is l'shayta and la'asad lave? The kedusha Eretz Yisrael, not that way. The answer is lefish kedushas have mikdash Yerushalayim ibn ha'shechina, v'ha'shechina ina b'teila, v'ha'yoime v'ha'shimoyses mikdashechem. And Chazal say, but the chiyuv and the kedusha about it, audits in Meiser, the kedusha of the rest of Eretz Yisrael has to do with the kibush and the chazaka. That's different, and that's different. That's the Rambam Shita that he holds that there's a difference in the kedusha of the Azores and Yerushalayim and the kedusha of the rest of Eretz Yisrael. The Kesef Mishnah brings that the Rambam is gerecht. The Gemara, it's a machloikis, if kitcha l'shaita, kitcha l'osha, it's a machloikis, the Rebbe Lezer and Yeshua, and the loch is always like a Yeshua. And then the Gemara, there's a loch, the machloikis is, again, between the Be'erch and the Shlokish, that Hamayla Bizman Hazeh, a person that brings a carbon Bizman Hazeh, the Be'erch is a schai, the Shlokim Potter, the Be'erch Machai, Kedusha l'shaina, kitcha l'osha lave, and Shlokish says Potter, loy kitcha l'osha lave. And the Loch mit Rebbe Yechon and Shlokish is always like Rebbe Yechon. But then the Raiva disagrees. The Raiva says, Sforas Atzma Yezu. Lo Yadatem Ayin Lo. The Kama Makomis with Mishnah, he brings a Shaila. Kama is Mishnah Mein Sham Mikdash Yerokam, the Gemara Amr, the Nafel Machitzas Alma, Laman Amr, Kedusha Rishayna, Lakotch, Lasila, Velachilik, Mikdash, Yerushalayim, Lasharetz Yisrael. ולא יודע לשניהם שפילו אליו יסי לעמד קדוש השני, קדוש הלא עשי לו ולאמר עליו לשור ארץ ישראל, לירושלים, על המידה שלא יאמר. לפי שהויה יודע עזרא, שהמקדש בירושלים עשיתם לשתנוס, לסקדש קידוש אחר עולמי בכבוד השם לעולם, כך נגלה מסויד השם ליראה. Unbelievable thing. Question, did he mean mamash anavua? The Ravid says that it was nigla to him, Misoid Hashem liyarev, which is sort of from heaven, that the Mokim HaMikdash is that the Kedusha is not lost in Lamed, because in the third base of Mikdash is going to be a new Kedusha, it'll be in Isgala, it'll be an unbelievable Kedusha. Lefikach, Hanichnas Bayatei, Sham, Ein Bay Kardas, there is no Kardas. The interesting thing is that the Magen Avraham is Simon Tov Kuf. He sent it out in the Maran Mekoimis. Tov Kuf. Samach Aleph, in the end of Hilchas Avelus, end of Tisha B'Av, Avelus for the base of Mikdash. In Simon Tov Kuf Samach Aleph, for emphasis the kasha of the that Ravid has against the Rambam. He says that there's an exception of Meiser and Bachor. Brings a Ravid from the Tosfos, the Gemara in Yutes in Makkas. And if emphasis the kasha that the Ravid has against the Rambam, he says the Rambam is gerecht, and therefore a person that goes today on to Har HaBayis is chayiv kodesh. Magen Avraham and Oira Chaim Simon Tov Kuf Samach Aleph. Okay. So let's summarize. We have a machloikis, Rebbe Lezer Bishua, machloikis Rebbe Yechon Shlokish, machloikis Rambam and Ravid LaHalacha. The kedusha that the kedusha rishon is kitcher l'shaita l'asalav, or that when the churban happened, the kedusha was broken. So the Rambam holds the kitcher l'shaita kitcher l'asalav, and the Rambam has an interesting twist. He holds that this whole machloikas is only lagabe the Beis Hamikdash and Yerushalayim, but Eretz Yisrael is a different din. The Shas, it's not so clear. It seems like the question is if the kedusha of the Azora, Yerushalayim, Eretz Yisrael, it's the same question. Is it kitcher l'shaita, kitcher l'asalav, or not? And the Rambam holds no, there's a difference. In Yerushalayim, the halacha is kitcher l'shaita, kitcher l'asalav. Why? Because that's the Shechina in a betela. And therefore, the Kedusha is still now. And therefore, the Mokim Mikdash is Kodesh also now. And a person will enter there is Chayiv Kodesh. And therefore, you could make the Karbanis even now, the Chayin Shambai is Bonu. And the Raiv disagrees. And the Poskim Acharonim all passing like the Rambam. Okay, is everyone with me here?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yes,
now there's
Rabbi,
one
we're
more
with
thing
you.
that we have to clarify, which is what are the Mekaimis, what are the specific Mekaimis in the Hana bias that we're talking about? So for that, we'll turn to Perek Zayin. Before we learn it inside, I just want to give a general thing that Rambam says that just like in the Mishkan, there were three machinas. There was machina Shechina, there was machina Levia, and there was machina Yisrael. The same thing in Eretz Yisrael. In the machina Shechina, you can't have a Tommy Mace. In the machana Levia, you can't have any tumah sheyotzela megufay, like Azov, and Nida B'Yoldus, or also a Balkari, perhaps. And the rest of Yerushalayim, you're not allowed to have a Metzoid. Now, how do you identify these three machanas, Ladoidus, in Yerushalayim? So the Rambam says like this, Hilchas Beis Abchira, Perek Zayin, Aloch Yudala. Shalosh machanas Yisrael b'midbar, there are three machanas. Machana Yisrael, the Arba machanas. Machana Levia, Shneimar Ba v'Savar l'Mishkan Yachanu. Machana Shechina, v'Pesach Chatzar El Ma'id L'Fnim. Who connect the Ladoidus for all generations later. V'Pesach Yerushalayim Ad Arbayis, K'Machana Yisrael. The gates of Yerushalayim until the gates of the Arbayis is Machana Yisrael. As we'll say soon, therefore, every mitzvah has to be kicked out from Yerushalayim. Mepeh is not allowed to enter through the gates of Yerushalayim. From the gate of the Harabayis till the gate of the Azora is Machana Levia. Mepesach Azora Lifni Machana Shechina. The gate of the Azora is Machana Shechina. V'achel v'ezes Noshim, which is a gate, the Ezes Noshim is in front of the Ezes Yisrael and Ezes Koinim, and the Chel was a space that was all around the Mikdash wall, which was protecting all around the Mikdash. So that was a Maila Yiseda, a special Maila that Chazal made in the time of the Beis Elamim, in the time of the Beis Hamikdash. And then, if you turn the page, Halacha Tezvav, the Rambam says that the Kedusha of Yerushalayim is that you can't have a Mitzvah in there. And then Harabayis is a higher level. Halacha Tezvav Mekudesh Remenish Ein Zavim Bezavas Nidus V'Yoldus Nechlosim L'Shamamuta Lahachnis a Mace Atzim El Harabayis. Even a mace could go into the Harabayis. Vein Tzarechlam Tomi Mace Nichnas L'Sham. But any tumah that's Yotzei Megufa is not allowed to go into the Harabayis. Achel, which is the wall around the whole Mikdash, which is Mekudesh Remenu, which ain't going with Mei Mace, a boil Nida Nechlosim L'Sham. That's Mei Mace, and the goy is not allowed to go there. Ezes Noshim Mekudesh Menachel, ain't full yom nichnas l'sham. The Ezes Noshim is a higher kedusha. Any full yom is not allowed to go into Ezes Noshim. He says them in the Vrayim, that's awesome in the Rabbanon. Al Minatoida mutat full yom l'konas l'machan alabiyah. Minatoida at full yom is allowed to go in there. Tomish nichnas l'Ezes Noshim ain't a chayv chatas. So there was a special extra thing that the Ezes Noshim that they made at Yisam Devrayim that a Tful Yoim is not allowed to go in there. What is a Tful Yoim? Tful Yoim is any person that has to go to the mikveh. They didn't wait. Those most chiyuv mikveh besides a nida, zov and nida, you just have to go to the mikveh in the morning. But the tahara is not complete until that night. So the Rambam has, it's pretty clear from the Rambam. The Rambam holds that any person that Tuma Yotzal Megufa is allowed to go into Harabayis. He has to go to the mikveh. He's allowed to go into the Harabayis. But he's not allowed to enter the Ezes Noshim until he will be Harav Shemesh. Until he'll have Harav Shemesh, until the night. Until nightfall, he's not allowed to go. And that's a Isur Midrabon. Dafke, not all the Rishonim agree. The Rashi holds L'chumra. The Gemara talks about this. The Gemara says in Yevomis, the Gemara says, Vayamad Yeshafat, the Yevomis Daf Zayin Amud Beis, Vayamad Yeshafat Bekal Yehuda Lifnei HaChotzer HaChadosha. What it says, Maya Chotzer HaChadosha. What does it mean? All of a sudden they built a new Chotzer in the Beis HaMikdash. Omer Rabbi Yochanan Shechitzpa Ba'ad Devarim. They were Machadish Dinim. Omer Tful Yom Al Yikonos V'Machan Aleviyah. They said that the Tful Yom is not allowed to go into the Machane Leviyah. Sounds like that the Tful Yom is not allowed to go into the whole Harabayis. And that's the way Rashi says it. And that's what Rashi says. The Tful Yom is not allowed to go into the entire Harabayis. But the Tosfos and the Rambam says no. It says Chotzer HaKadosha. What is Chotzer? Harabayis is not called a Chotzer. You're talking about the Ezas Nosh. And that's what the Rambam says. That's what the Rambam emphasizes. He says that Ezas Noshim has a special Kedusha that ain't Tful Yom Nichnas L'Sham. But he says, Isa Zam Divrayim. In a Torah is Mutter Tful Yom L'Konas L'Machane Leviyah. But they made a special Isser only in the Ezas Noshim. But in the rest of the Harabayis, even if it's Tumah Yoitzel Megufa, he can toivel the mikvah in the morning, and then he's allowed to go. Why am I emphasizing this so much? Because soon when we'll get down to the practical thing, it's very negayah, this thing, including it's very negayah to understanding about how close you're allowed to stand for the Kollel Yom Rishon today, you're allowed to put in a note, and so on. So this lumdus is going to be in a few minutes very, very relevant. Okay, so if we should summarize everything we just learned in the Rambam. Number one, there's a machloikis in the Gemara, Kedusha Rishona, Kitcha L'Shaita, Kitcha L'Osilava, or not. The Rambam paskins that when it comes to Yerushalayim and it comes to the Azorah, that Kedusha Rishona, Kitcha L'Shaita, Kitcha L'Osilava. I would like to note, even though the Rambam is not talking about the Kedusha the Harabayis, but it's clear that the same thing would apply to the Harabayis. Why is he not talking about the Harabayis? Because over there he's talking about adding places. Could be the Rambam doesn't hold that you're allowed to add to the Harabayis. Could be the Rambam holds you can't add to the Harabayis. Again, this will be very relevant in a few minutes to understand if you could add to the Harabayis or you can't add to the Harabayis. So the Rambam paskins that Kedusha Rishona, Kedusha L'Shaita, Kitcha L'Osilava applies to every place of the Shechina, which is the Azorah, the Harabayis, Yerushalayim, and that's the way all the Gedolah Poskim paskin down to the Mogan Avram, which we paskin very much like the Mogan Avram in Oira Chaim Siman Tov Kuf Samach Aleph Sim Beis, brought in the Mishnah Berurah. That was the first thing we covered. Then Perek Vav of Hilchos Beis HaBechira, and then Perek Zayin of Hilchos Beis HaBechira. We covered the three circles, the Yerushalayim. Second circle is around the Harabayis. Third circle is around the Azorah, which is Machane Yisrael, Machane Leviyah, Machane Shechina. The Azorah can't enter Machane Yisrael, which is Yerushalayim. Tumah Sheyotzeh Megufa, a discharge from the body, which is like a Balkeri, Azov, and Nidav Yeldus, can't enter into the entire Machane Leviyah unless they already went to the mikveh, including that they counted the days. If it's a Zov, if they count 7 days. If it's a Balkeri, just has to go to the mikveh. But the Rambam holds that you don't have to wait for Harav Shemesh, you don't have to wait for nightfall. Rashi holds you do have to wait for nightfall. But the Rambam agrees that when it comes into the walls of the Beis HaMikdash, already from the Ezas Noshim, even though Minat Torah Tful Yom is allowed, Chacham said you're not allowed to. Then there is most of the part which is surrounded with the wall, which is called Machane Shechina. So it's also for a Tommy Mace to go in there, and if a person goes in too from the Heichel Lifnim, is Chayev Kodesh. So the first issue about entering the Harabayis is you have to know that where is the Azorah. So it's about 135 wide and 189, 190 long. Amos, which is much less, it's a smaller space than the entire Harabayis, much smaller. But you have the problem is to locate. There's a misconception that Kodesh HaKadoshim is in the Al-Aqsa, in the Dome of the Rock, in the Dome of the Rock Mosque. And that's where the Even HaShasiyah is called the Dome of the Rock. Even that, if that was the case, you have to know what's the center point. So start measuring. But even that's not clear. It's not clear. The Harabayis today, some say, are much bigger than the original Harabayis, which is true. The Mishnah says in the second Perek in Midos that the Harabayis is is 500 amma, 500 amma. So the funny thing is, if you go with the midas of the Chazon Ish, like the one adorim is too small. It's too small. It's fascinating. Too small. But then you have on the Ma'ariv and Mizrach, it seems to be almost double than 500 ammas. So So the answer is that Hurdus rebuilt the Harabais, and is brought in Yosifah and in Josephus that he added much to the Harabais. If you ever took the tour, the Kollel tour, the underground tour, so they show you the beauty of the wall and how marvelous it was constructing the Harabais, and the Chazal say, Mishaloyro, Binyan Hurdus, Binyan Miyamav, that the Hurdus rebuilt the second base of Mikdash. So he totally rebuilt it. And someone that didn't see how magnificent, gorgeous this building was, never saw something so magnificent. It was like from this wonders of the old world of how they built something so beautiful. Which, by the way, also goes back to the Rambam, which is that Meforshim say, how could Hurdus destroyed, as the Gemara says in the beginning of Baba Basra, took apart the entire Beis HaMikdash. How did they bring Karbonis in the time that the Hurdus was building? It wasn't built overnight. Archaeologists show that it was built over a long period of time, and in the time of the Khurban, they were still adding to the building of Hurdus started 200 years earlier. It was a huge project. We're not talking about a project that was there for a few days. So according to the Rambam, it's verstandig that you're allowed to bring the Karbonis even though the walls are not up. So they were allowed to keep on doing the avodah on the Mizbeach, even though the walls were taken down. So the rest of the Harabayis, l'chayra, doesn't have the kedusha of the Harabayis. The rest of the Harabayis, l'chayra, doesn't have the kedusha of the Harabayis. You just have to figure out where is the rest of the Harabayis and where is not the rest of the Harabayis, which is the one issue. Second issue is, which is the main issue that Kollel Yisrael are worried about, is that a person with good intention and knowledge knows where to go, but another Yid, which is not religious, sees a Yid metabord, a Yid that looks like a Shem Torah Mitzvah is going in there, he knows where to go. But this other Yid, it's not a Shem Torah Mitzvah, doesn't know where to go, and he can end up going in a place which is Chayav Kodesh. A very interesting thing which I sent out in the Ma'ariv Mekoimis. I mean, just fascinating. I mentioned it once in the Shir last year, and unfortunately time is ticking now, and maybe in another Shir this week I'll have to go and really cover this more thoroughly. Just fascinating thing. There's a sefer called Hamikdash, written, I mentioned it last week, written by the Dov Levanoni, who passed away last year about Tisha B'Av time. He built them. He was a Holocaust survivor, wonderful, wonderful person. They actually had an interview with his wife this last week in the Kfar Chabad magazine. And she said she came with her husband when he built this model of the Beis HaMikdash based on the Rambam. He was like a pioneer. And until then, there were many models that were built based on the Tiferes Yisrael. The Rambam has a different shita. So he came from Israel to the Rebbe. And he wasn't feeling well that Sunday. It was Chav Vav Adar Rishon Tav Shin Nun Beis. Do you imagine? And he was going to push it up. He said, no, he wants to go. He was Zoiche. It was the last Sunday of dollars, and he was there. And the Rebbe looked, and I told the story last week about what the Rebbe noticed, that there was something off with the measurement of the keves. But just to his wife, she said that the Rebbe gave her a wonderful bracha. The Rebbe gave her an extra $1, and the Rebbe told her you should be zoichet to see the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi, and you will ask your husband then if they rebuilt it, everything in the right way. Anyway, in the end of his sefer, he has a few studies, and one is a fascinating study about where is the Makom HaMikdash. The reason I'm showing it to you is just to show you that you might think you know where the Makom HaMikdash is, and it could vary so much from one place to the other place. Many people think that the Makom HaMikdash is where there is the Dome of the Rock. According to his pshat, it's a loy minei v'loy miktsase. Loy minei v'loy miktsase. I sent out the Madam Akamis. You'll see the picture. There is a space, and I was once rented a apartment. It was 2 years ago. We went to visit our daughter, Mindy, who is now Baruch Hashem this week. She's going on a shlichus to Texas. Her and her husband Shmuley Ebshel Zageb Nasachat Flocha. So we went to visit her. She was in Sem. And we rented an apartment in Yerushalayim right next to Esha Torah. So we ate there was a beautiful other guy's roof that we ate to Suda Shabbos. And then you see between the Al-Aqsa mosque and the Dome of the Rock, there's a shetach which is open. There's nothing there besides grass, a couple of trees. So he has an entire cheshbon showing that is exactly the Makom HaMikdash. The Dome of the Rock is way off. It's b'chlal not in the Makom HaMikdash. Al-Aqsa Mosque, b'chlal not in the Makom HaMikdash. Loy minei v'loy miktsase. I sent out the picture, and because time is short, maybe we'll leave it for another time this week to explain why. He has several rayas for it, several proofs for it, and some are stronger, some are weaker. I'm not going to say that I'm totally convinced beyond reasonable doubt, but there is doubt about the Makom HaMikdash. You might think it's in one place on the Har HaBayis, and it's totally in a different place. Totally in a different place. Does anyone have the Madam Akamis?
No, I don't have it.
Huh?
No, I don't have it.
The email's loading in. I got it from you about 15 minutes ago.
So if you didn't, I'll try to show it. It's very hard to.
No, it'll be there about 3 or 4 minutes. It should be ready.
So
Should be
send it
covered.
out soon, Mitzvah Hashem. You'll be able to see it's a loy minei v'loy miktsase. The Makom HaMikdash, according to this study, is in a totally different place, not where the Dome of the Rock is. The Dome of the Rock is totally not the Makom HaMikdash. So that's the problem. The first issue is to locate where is the Makom HaMikdash. Because the Har HaBayis, a person could say maybe he's a Balkari, so he'll toivel in the mikveh, and the Rambam holds that even if Tuma Yotzal of Megufa, he can go to, as long as he's not going into the Azor or even the Ezes Noshim, he's not entering the place of the Chayil. So, if he's good, he's allowed to go on the Har HaBayis. But the problem is, where is that place? Where is that place? We don't know. And if you think you know, but what is another Yid that doesn't know? And he'll see one Yid go up, he'll go up too. And that logic applies also to the place of the Har HaBayis, which l'chayda, we can all agree was not sanctified in the days of Hurdus, because as I said before, it's a shaila in general if the Har HaBayis can have expansion. And even if Har HaBayis could have expansion, which the Rambam is mashma can't, it would need to have a ceremony that includes a melech and a urim v'tumim. In the time of Hurdus, there was no melech Yisrael. He was apostle of melech. So he himself already make the deal a non-deal. So even though there is the place within the walls today of the Har HaBayis, which are probably not Kodesh, and there is places on the Har HaBayis which is Kodesh, but you can go to the mikveh and enter l'chayda, because the Tful Yom is allowed to enter according to the Rambam in the Har HaBayis.
Well, 10:27.
Where's the Makom HaMikdash? The Makom HaMikdash, you're not allowed to go, because a Tmei Mace is not allowed to go. And we are all Tmei Mace. We don't have the Pora Aduma. We're a Tmei Mace, so we can't enter. A Tmei Mace cannot enter. Okay. Then there's a second issue, which is seems to be brought up by the Kafta V'Ferach, which is a certain space which was thought. I just have to tell you something which is fascinating. The Radvaz thought that the Kollel Yom Rishon that we have today is not the koisel of the Harabayis, is the koisel of the Azora. That is one of the reasons why some people stand 2 feet away from the Harabayis, from the koisel. 2 feet might not be enough because they want to stand beyond the chayil. Because the Rabbanon said you shouldn't enter even to Makom HaChayil. So, tell me, Mason, the Rabbanon is not allowed to enter the chayil. So about 2 feet is probably not enough for the chayil. But Bavadia Yosef writes that he thinks there's a different reason why some people have the meaning to stand 2 feet away from the Harabayis. From the Koisel Amarovi. And that is what we spoke about last week. That could be Bias Mikzah Shema Bia, like the Mishkanas Labe Yaakov, Reb Moshe Meshel holds. And since the bricks are like Balachsim, they're going, every brick, every stone is going in beyond the other stone. And since we're now, most of the Habayis is underground, the Koisel Amarovi, most of it is underground. So when you stand mamash at the wall, you're already at the mokum, which is within the Harabayis. So what's the big deal? You'd say, go to the mikveh. Go to the mikveh. So firstly, again, what's if another you didn't go to the mikveh? And what's with a woman? And what's with girls? Till the chasna, they don't go to the mikveh. And even a woman, if she was, if she had beer with her husband, she doesn't realize she has to go to the mikveh now. She has to enter the harabayas. So therefore, they have a meaning to stand a little further away from the Koisel Amarovi. But it's just fascinating that the Warshittas that thought that the Koisel Amarovi that we have is not the Koisel of the Harabayis. They thought that that's the Koisel of the Azora. That's the back wall, basically, of behind the Kodesh HaKadosh. Most persons disagree with that. And based on archaeological digs from 67 till now, it seems to be pretty clear beyond reasonable doubt that the Koisel Amarovi that we have is a Koisel Amarovi not of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, it's a Koisel Amarovi of the Harabayis. Be it as it may, there was a time where it wasn't clear. And there was a neighborhood, the side of what's today the Koisel Amarovi, that Yidden had a minig not to enter. And there's a Chazon Nochel, which I spoke about him a few weeks ago in the Shir. He was at Rav in Yerushalayim about 300 years ago. And he writes that because they're choishish for the Shita of Rashi, that a Tful Yom is not allowed to enter the Harabayis. So even if they went in mikveh, maybe they're Tful Yom. And they're also choishish that maybe they're Azav. Why should we say that a person is Azav? Zav means a male discharge that's unhealthy. That's not the regular discharge. So then you have to have Shim and Akim, you have to count Shim and they go to the mikveh, and so that's so therefore they don't enter that mokum, which again they thought that neighborhood near the there was a shukutna, it was a shuk, an Arab shuk there, that they didn't enter because of this issue. So Kolchkin on the Harabayis itself. This second logic is very much advanced by the Stipler, the Koheles Yaki. So again, to summarize the two issues about not entering the Harabayis. First issue is there's three machanas, Machane Shechina, Machane Levia, and Machane Yisrael. The Machane Levia, which is the Harabayis, a Tommy Mace is allowed to go there. Tumach Yotzel Luguf has to go to the mikveh, and even if he wasn't at Tful Yom yet, he could go there. But the Makom HaMikdash, you're not allowed to go to Tful Yom. And if you go into Mamish beyond the Ezas Yisrael, if he goes into the Heichel, is a Chayiv Kodesh. We don't know where's the Makom HaMikdash. And therefore, even if you do know, but another Yid might not know, and they're going to see you go, and they'll go, and the Chas V'Sholom they'll be initial to go in a place where it's Issa Kodesh. The second issue that's brought up is that maybe people today are Azav, and maybe the halach is like Rashi. But why should you say the halach is like Rashi? The Rambam, the Zongenim, or Noisa Kalim don't argue on him. Rashi didn't write it as a psak halacha. But okay, those that had that minig not to go up to Har Bayis because of that chashash, so that's their reason. But it seems that the first reason is the stronger reason. Now I'm going to talk about my setup. The Rebbe had an opinion about this. When I was in Yerushalayim, several times, I enjoy going to eat Leil Shabbos by Mr. Schloss. A Lubavitcher Chassid that bought a house there in 1967 when houses were quite cheap. And he has students that he picks up at the Kollel. He has usually 20, 30 people at a Shabbos table Friday night. And similar to our friend Sasson Azar, and a private tish. So, but then I enjoy going there. But there was once that maybe it was the last time or the time before, I was at his house Friday night. There was no orchim, zero orchim. So we were talking. He told me many stories, and among them is that in '67 he went up to the Har Bayis, places where it was said that it's mutter, that's for sure not the Makom HaMikdash and so on. At that time, there was a Lubavitcher Chassid in Yerushalayim, the Moshe Weber. The Moshe Weber was standing at that time guard at the entrance of the Har Bayis and begging Yidden not to go there. There was a Lubavitcher Chassid, some gebrennt, the Kovid HaMikdash, and he made all the arguments he could make that we do know which place, we don't know which place, about going to the mikveh. There's another argument, by the way, which is that the Rambam says you're only allowed to go there for a tzorech mitzvah. Are you really going to tzorech mitzvah? What's the tzorech if you're going there? Anyway, the Moshe Weber. You remember the Moshe Weber?
No, Rabbi Frank is a chassid of.
Rabbi Frank is his chassid. Right. Yeah. He talked to teach Rabbi Frank how to do his bonanos, how to daven. Oh, very good, exactly. So the Moshe Weber stood there. He stood guard in the few months after the 6-Day War, begging people not to go up to Har Bayis. So Lubavitcher Chassid go. He said, Mr. Schloss, you can't go. So he said, no, I'm going with Rabbi Getz. He was the Rav of the Har Bayis. He told me where I could go. I said, I'm going to call the Rebbe and tell him. So Schloss didn't believe him. Anyway, he kept his promise. Next day, he gets a call from mosquitoes. Could you imagine? Rabbi Groner was on the phone. He said that Rebbe asked that he should call him, that he shouldn't ever go into the Har Bayis again. And the Rebbe said that even if he thinks that he knows the Makom HaMikdash, and therefore he's not going to enter the Makom HaMikdash, but he's going to enter the other places, and he's going to go to the mikveh, so he's allowed to go. It's Machin Aleviyah. The Rebbe said he shouldn't go because, Dr. Rebbe, that he knows, or he thinks he knows where he's going, but another Yid is going to see a Shomer Torah Mitzvahs entering, and he will think it's permissible to go, and he'll go in a place which also is Chayiv Kodesh. That was the last time Mr. Schloss stepped onto the Har Bayis. And on other stories, interesting stories, Rabbi Getz thought that he knows where the Aron Kodesh, where the Aron is buried, and he wanted to do excavations there with the Israeli antiquities. So he asked the Schloss to consult with the Rebbe. You can imagine what the answer was. Unequivocally, no. The Rebbe said that that's going to be the job of. I don't want to misquote, but the Nekuda was that excavations will be done in Mitzvah Shem by Mashiach Tzidkenu. Okay, so that lays to rest the issue. So again, to summarize the three issues about going up to the Har Bayis, you have to know where's Machin Shechina, Machin Leviyah, Machin Yisrael. Machin Shechina, a Tomei Meis is not allowed to go there. We're all Tomei Meis. Machin Leviyah, you have to go to the mikveh. If you go to the mikveh, so you have to know, first of all, it has to be male and female. They have to go to the mikveh. How many females are going to the mikveh? It has to be in the time of the chodesh they could go. Girls don't go. So that itself is also a problem. Especially if you'll think that maybe there's a question of Zov. Who knows how to count Shiva Nakim? Do you know of a male that knows how to count Shiva Nakim? But anyway, that seems to be a smaller chash. It seems that the Rebbe was not worried about the second chash. The Rebbe was worried about the first chash, which is who tells you that you can go, because if you're going to go, another Yid is going to go. And he's going to go to the Makom which is also to go, which is an interesting thing. In other words, the Rebbe sidestepped all the arguments. The Rebbe didn't argue about what's the Makom HaMikdash. Okay, you think you know where's the Makom HaMikdash, and you're not going to step on that area. But the other Yid, which is not Shemer Torah Mitzvah, doesn't know where's the Makom HaMikdash. And that was the Rebbe's main objection about going up to the Temple Mount. The Rebbe held it's also Gomur, because you're going to be machshel another Yid. The other Yid will end up stepping on a place which is Issa Kodesh. So you caused another Yid to go in a place which is Issa Kodesh. Besides the Rebbe's argument, the three other main arguments is, one is, where is the Makom HaMikdash? The Atome Mesa says, we don't know. Number two is, you really have to go to the mikveh before you go up. And then there's all kinds of other chashas, which I don't think is so strong. The Rambam holds that a Tful Yom is allowed to go. Big deal. So you'll tell the women that they have to go. But then it becomes legitimate to go up. And then there's the Yidden that want to go close to the wall, and then there's the women off the wall. You heard of that organization, the Women Off the Wall? You start telling them that you have to go there, and you have to go to the mikveh first, and this will be very complicated. One, a Fruma Yid will go, and a non-Fruma Yid will go. And the third is that has to be L'tzorech Mitzvah. Okay. Just to finish off for dessert on this issue, there's a beautiful tshuva from the Tzitz Eliezer. So if the Shemana McCormick was sent out, so if you'd like, you can look together with me, we'll read. There was several stories of Gedolei Yisrael, which supposedly they went up to the place of the Har HaBayis. First, let's start with those that didn't go up. This article from Machina Haredi, so he brings that an article from Tzvi Pesach Frank in a Sefer Tura de Malka. He brings a letter written from the Ramban. The Ramban writes to his family in Barcelona. He says, "Hineni magidloi ki alisa el har hazeisim amuchumen keneged har habayis v'asamachloi ein beineim ela ein beki yeshafek sham keneged beis hamikdash kanosi charuzaisai bebechi rabba." He said that he prayed on the Har HaBayis. Why did he pray? On the Mount of Olives. Why did he go on the Mount of Olives? Why didn't he go closer? It seems clear that he felt that it was also. Therefore, he davened on the Har HaZeisim. Don't ask why the Ramban didn't daven by the Koisel. As I explained Shabbos, in the days of the Ramban, it wasn't known where the Koisel is. They didn't know. Even 600 years ago, the Kafta V'Ferach, B'Shturi Aparchi writes, we don't know. We don't know where the Koisel HaMaravi is. The story that's brought from the Moshe Chagiz that in 1517, when Suleiman the Great conquered Yerushalayim, he uncovered where the Koisel HaMaravi is. I'm just bringing this up again that you shouldn't ask, how come the Ramban davened the other side? The Yidden used to daven in the Mizrach of the Har HaBayis, not where we daven today in the past 500 years in the Maidav, because they didn't know where the Koisel HaMaravi is. So much so, when it was revealed, there were those that thought that the Koisel HaMaravi is not the wall of the Har HaBayis, it's the wall of the Kodesh HaKadosh. So, you look in the Tzitz Eliezer, Ois Hey, Bizdam the Zois Oil Foyter Rosa Rama Ora Kala. Avol Telos Rabba, Vihima Shamatik Besifre Hadobu Yabia Oim. It's a letter to Rebbe Vadia Yosef Zechron Lebrach. He says, he tells a story in his book about Sir Moses Montefiore. Went up to the Har HaBayis, the Temple Mount. The authorities in Yerushalayim were really excited. He was a wealthy Jew. As you know, so Moses Montefiore came to Israel several times. There is a legend that says, it's never been substantiated, that the top row of rocks in the Koisel HaMaravi was built by Sir Moses Montefiore because Arabs would stand on top and throw rocks in the Yidden that were davening by the Koisel HaMaravi. It's true that those rocks were built about 150 years ago, but it's never been substantiated that that project was initiated or paid for by Sir Moses Montefiore. Good story anyhow. Anyway, Sir Moses Montefiore was given the royal tour of Yerushalayim with the Arabs, including the Har HaBayis, and he was very excited. He got to go to the Mikdash. As soon as he came out, there was the son of the Gaon Melissa, Chavas Das. His name was Reb Moshe Melissa, and he made a chedem against him. how could you go on the Har HaBayis? Now, there is two versions of what happened afterwards. The version that
somebody should
Ovadia
mute
Yosef
himself.
brings of
You
the
hear
story
a lot of
is
noises.
that the Rabbonim Yerushalayim appeased Sir Moses Montefiore, and they told him, this guy, his father was a very choshev Rob, the Chavas Das, but he's a little not so Jerusalem syndrome. Today, please forgive him. Not a chedim, you're a nice guy. Take out your checkbook, start writing checks for the charitable organizations Yerushalayim. That's one version of the story. And this is the version of Ovadia Yosef brings. Now, the Ovadia Yosef is wondering, how could Rabbanim Yerushalayim say such a thing? So he has a whole tshuva. So says Rav Waldenberg, the Tzitz Eliezer, I just want to let you know that there's another version of the story. Turn to the next page.
Hold on, please mute.
There's a different version of the story. It says, from Shlomo Rachamim Abulafia, the son of Reb Chana Rishon LeZion at that time, who said the story was quite the opposite. That he came to the Rabbonim Yerushalayim, and he said he realized he made an unbelievable mistake, and he cried, and they gave him a tikkun tshuva because he did an Isur Kodesh, and that was it. Anyway, the Waldenberg brings a third girsa to the story, which he thinks is the most correct. Is that at the same time that they spoke to was a shtik ama'or. It was a push the yid. They also asked Yerushalayim not to go make kashmil against him because he did it with Shmulus and it was a mistake. So even though they weren't masking, but they didn't think it was a good idea to make a big kashmil and to plaster it all over Meir She'orim because it was a mistake. He made a mistake. Anyway, another story he brings from the Rambam. There's a story that the Rambam says that he writes that he davened in the Mokim HaMikdash and the Bayis HaGodol VeHaKodesh.
Could you tell
Some bring a raya that the Rambam went on the Har HaBayis. So he brings from Gedolei Asfardim that said it's not true. There was a place that he davened that was probably what's today's Solomon Stables or the Al-Aqsa Mosque, or maybe there were more buildings involved there. Anyway, look inside what he says. He said the Rambam Chas v'Shalom he never davened on the Har HaBayis. Bottom line, he brings the old minig Yerushalayim, but he's not allowed to go up to Har HaBayis. But I just want to bring your attention to two pieces over here about the Kollel Yom Rishon. Amnam Kena Kollel Yom Rishon laws and Nishakayim B'hem V'Diluk Kodesh Basement the Shena V'Taratufetenu Ve'elu Kol Pinas Poinus Misham Yigala V'Yerokim Mikodesh Mikdash Ha'esh Os Sheyigala V'Yafiyam Memorah. Brings from Chasam Sofer. Chazal say that the Shechina was never moved from the Kollel Yom Rishon. And he says the pshat is just like a human being has an etzem luz that he'll rebuild. The Eibush leaves the Kollel Yom Rishon that from there we're going to rebuild the Mitzvah, the Har HaBayis, and the Beis HaMikdash. And another beautiful verse he brings, I think I mentioned it last week, from the Yanis Dvash. It says Heishim Ocher Yeminoi. What is the pshat? It says in Eicha Heishim Ocher Yeminoi. So Kedem is Mizrach, Ocher is Ma'ariv. Ocher is the Ma'ariv band, the Kollel Yom Rishon. That in the time of the Churban, the Eibishter made that the Yemina of the Eibishter, which is the Gila Kedusha of the Eibishter, should at least remain in the place of the Kollel Yom Rishon. That there should be a place where the Yidden can have the Kedusha palpable, which is that Lo Yizos Shechina Ma'olam Kollel Yom Rishon. So therefore, that's the place to daven, not the Har HaBayis. Just one more thing, which is actually two more for this. One is that Shmulik sent to me last week, which is that the Frierdiker Rebbe, when he was there to pay test, he actually put his hands on the Kollel Yom Rishon and kissed it. Just telling. In other words, not only did he not stand further away, but that he kissed the wall. And another thing, which is a fascinating thing my brother found for me, in the Sefer B'Tzelach Chochmah, page 45, the conversation that the Rebbe had with the current Gedet Rebbe. The current Gedet Rebbe, Rabbi Yankala, had many yeshudis with the Rebbe. And here is a fascinating conversation. The Rebbe says I'd like to ask you a shayla and alochim. What's the minig about those that put notes in the Kollel Yom Rishon? Does the shayla be as b'miktzah shema bia? Are you allowed to put a note into the Kollel Yom Rishon? Last week I told you a story that I heard from the son of the Minka Cherub, that at Musa Rebbe today, that the Rebbe asked that the mosquitoes call, asked him what his Zayda did. Here the Rebbe asked Rabbi Yankala, the Gerer Rebbe, what he thinks about putting a note in the walls of the Kollel Yom Rishon, because l'chayda you're going in, bias miktzas, you're going in. Rabbi Yankala answered, there are those that put in notes, so there are those that are nizar, they don't put in notes. The Rebbe asked, is there a hira about this? By Pearl, in other words, what's Rabbi Yankala says, I don't know, but the minig is to be careful and go to the mikveh before you put a note into the Kollel Yom Rishon. Shaila is, if it's the wall of the Harabayis or the Azorah, if you say it's the wall of the Harabayis, so if he was a mikveh, he's a full yoim, and according to the Rambam, he can go into the Harabayis, even if he's a Tommy Mace. The Rebbe says, oh, Mastama, that's the head for those that put a note into the cracks of the Kollel Yom Rishon, because they hold that the Kollel is really the wall of the Har Habayis. In other words, because if it's the wall of the Azorah, it's not going to help to go to the mikveh. You're a mace. And he's mikveh shmabiyah. So how's it going to help to go to the mikveh? But if you hold that it's the wall of the Har Habayis, even the Rebbe asking such a question, it's like, oh, you think it's off the wall. We know today, based on archaeology, that this is the wall of the Har Habayis. But the Rebbe macht sich nicht wissen. The Kollel Yisrael had the Shaila. The Rebbe said, oh, the fact that they go to the mikveh, plus the fact that we consider it the wall of the Har Habayis, even if you say bis mikveh shema bia, but the fact that you go to the mikveh helps. Wow. It seemed that the Rebbe wasn't settled. He kept on asking this question by different people, but this issue wasn't settled. In other words, based on this, so the next time you go to the Kollel, if you want to really, do at least Lefnim Mishur Sadin, if you're going to put a note into the walls or touch the wall, then you should go to the mikveh beforehand. Fascinating. I should go to my brother for showing this to me. Again, it's in the Sefer B'Tzelach Chochma. Conversations that have okay. Let's. Time is short, so let's do the Kitzur Nimrit, the other two shaylas. If you have a chance, I sent out a ton of Mara Mekoimis with fascinating stories and so on. And it's in the Mara Mekoimis. Bottom line question: is a Yid allowed to go today onto the Har Habayis? Answer: most clearly, Yisrael said unequivocally no. Story with and then the Rebbe's conversation with the Rebbe Yankala, the current Gerer Rebbe, where the Rebbe Yankala said that the heter of putting your note in is based on the fact that you already went to the mikveh, and the Rebbe says, oh, but that's only if you go with the fact that this is the wall of the Har Habayis, and the full yom is allowed to enter the Har Habayis. You see from the Rebbe, he was not
somebody
that if you're full yom, you can't enter the Har Habayis. You see several things over here. The Rebbe wasn't that concerned about the second issue. We're talking about it. It doesn't matter if it's full yom, but you have to go to the mikveh. Bencher, next time you go to the Kollel, you go to the mikveh first before you stick in that note.
I'm
Yeah, anyway, going to the mikveh before you go to the Kollel. Okay, because you're not mishakeh. But you know it's tough if you go like to daven into the second minyan in the Kollel. You have to find your Shalim mikveh that's open. There is now there's a mikveh actually in the old city that's open. But the problem is not that it's open or not. It's open, but you have to get up another half hour earlier before that. That's already challenging.
And I think the mime in this mikveh is from Beis Hamikdash Hasheni.
No, nicht gefährlich. The past few years they fixed it up. It's nicht gefährlich. Okay, let's go Bezrizus Otzim to the second and third Shaila. I'm just mamish Bezrizus. I sent out the Mara Mekoimis here. My children showed me this. in the kids magazine. If you're so basically, the story is like this: that there's a company that makes shoes made out of bread. The shoes, which are actually more like slippers, come beautifully packaged in a cardboard box, just like actual shoes, and cost 25 euros. Not a bad price for shoes, but very expensive when you consider you're actually just buying 2 baguettes. Not even So the kids asked, are you allowed to use baguettes for shoes? The answer is absolutely not. There's a special, Chazal said, a special zehirus that a yid has to have, not only in Baltashkas, but dafke bezoyim ba'oichlin and dafke bepas. Shemar says you can find out. Oisadim tzarache bepas, mani milo de lo mamizbeh. The mamizbeh, loy, hilkach, the special thing that we see Chazal have in the kovid legabe bread. A third shaila. Someone asked last week if you can give a bracha to a goy. Someone last week mentioned the story that a cop pulled over a person, and the guy pulled out his wallet, his license, a picture of the Rebbe. The guy said, the cop said, he used to drive escort the Rebbe to the oil. He didn't have children. He asked the Rebbe for a bracha. The Rebbe gave him a bracha. He had a baby, and he named the baby Menachem Mendel. So someone asked last week, should you give? So you're allowed to daven for a goy or give a bracha for a goy. It's a good question. It's a good question because in Shulchan Aruch, Sinah Kufnul Ches, in Yeridei, Sifalif says that you're not allowed to be merapa a goy unless you're getting paid, and there's a shaila of Eva. But the Darkei Tshuva writes that there's exceptions. If there's a person that's not over by the Zorah, is from Chassidei Umas Ha'olam, and Befrat, if it's going to be a Kiddush Hashem, then a person is allowed to daven, will give them a broch. And l'choyda, there's a clear ayah from Tanakh. There's a story of Elisha, right? That Naaman came to him because he had a tzaras, and he healed Naaman from his tzaras, which was a general of Aram, who was a goy. And he came to Elisha, and Elisha made an unbelievable Kiddush Hashem by healing the goy. So Mamela, the Darkei Tshuva says if the goy is from the Chassidei Yom Rishon, or if it's a shaila making a Kiddush Hashem, then it's mutter. So definitely in the story that the Rebbe was talking about, there was probably, if there's a goy that was escorting the Rebbe to the oil to daven for Klal Yisrael, he was from the Chassidei Yom Rishon, number one. And number two, in this case, there was an unbelievable Kiddush Hashem. So let's mutter go. Okay, David shall Hoffman, that all the Chassidei Yom Rishon should finally come out of the woodworks. The Rambam says that Yemoisa Mashiach, there'll be a Chelek Olam above for the Chassidei Yom Rishon. And definitely we can need a lot of goyim to build bridges and roads and do all kinds of good things while we're going to be sitting and learning Torah Yom Ha'alayla B'Beis Mashiach Tzidkenu. So the Eibush will take a bench and all those Chassidei Yom Rishon, and they should all get to their jobs and start working L'sak and Olam B'Malchus Shin Daled Yud to make the world a beautiful place L'Sheves Yitzorah. And we should take it from the Yad, B'Beis Mashiach Tzidkenu. There's no better time than this week. Chamisha Asabov, Lo Yom Tovim B'Yisrael, Chamisha Asabov, to be zoichet to have the Gula Mitzvah Shlema Yedei Mashiach Tzidkenu.
Amen.
Definitely, then we're going to have the Pora Aduma. We'll be taught, and we'll be going up to the Har HaBayis and to the Mokim HaMikdash, V'sham Nasik HaMitzvahs Ritzonecha.
Amen.
Yeshikoyach everyone for joining us.
Thank you for giving us the shira.
Slocha Diketog.
Amen. Rabbi, a man can go to Azarat Nashim?
I think the rabbi's off already.